If he wins this championship, you can make an argument for the greatest championship in F1 history.
Yes, for me, this would be better than 2021.
Hello and welcome to Racing News 365 answers your fan questions from last weekend's United States Grand Prix. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and helping me to answer your questions is, of course, the awesome duo that is 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Absolutely Coop, and the man, the myth, the almighty legend who is still in Austin, Texas. That is lead editor Ian Parks. And Ian, unsurprisingly, we've had some brilliant questions sent in because there was a fair few talking points that came up across the US Grand Prix.
Just a few. It was a fabulous event. Well, unfortunately, the Grand Prix itself didn't quite live up to, and I'm going to use the word that Sam used in the podcast that we recorded as well, that you can watch on our good channel, Prelude, because yes, the Prelude did deliver a great sprint race. Huge amount of action in that, more action in that most definitely than there was across the 50-odd laps of the Grand Prix, that's for sure, because that sadly was a little bit of a letdown, but it gave us another Max Verstappen victory. It ensured that Max had the perfect weekend of sprint pole, sprint victory, Grand Prix pole, and Grand Prix victory. Only the third time that has been achieved. And of course, Max has achieved all three of those now. No other driver has been able to do that since the sprint was introduced into Formula One. So yeah, overall, just a fab weekend. And of course, we now do have a real, genuine three-way title fight, where previously, of course, it had been so often just the two drivers, the two McLaren drivers that we were talking about predominantly. But now this is Max on a charge.
And as I pointed out, we've had some brilliant questions sent in. So once again, thank you to everyone who has sent in questions. For any of them that we didn't get round to answering, apologies. We select at random 5 questions. So please do keep sending your questions in, and hopefully it will randomly be selected for any of the remaining Grand Prix. Before we get on with answering those fan questions, a very special announcement. And for those watching, I recommend listening very closely, because at Racing News 365 across last weekend's US Grand Prix and this weekend's Mexico City Grand Prix, we are running a special prize giveaway. If you'd like to win a special edition Racing Bull shirt signed by both Isaac HADJAR and Liam Lawson, all you've got to do to be in the chance of winning is be subscribed to this channel, racingnews365.com. It is as simple as that. The winner will be announced in next week's podcast post Mexico City. I wish you the very best of luck. It is an absolutely awesome prize. I think the best we've given away yet. First question then comes from Jaden, and Ian, you can have this one. Will McLaren regret not continuing developments on the Muckle 39 or MCL 39, depending on which way you like to say it, Sam?
Yeah, I know Sam doesn't like us calling it Muckle. It's all right, folks. We had a little conversation about this before we started recording this video. I've often said Muckle 39. It's just MCL, shorten it to Muckle. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. But
Mercedes Wickstein? Yeah.
Oh God, no.
25.
Yeah. You could get really stupid with this anyway. I'll let you answer it.
Moving swiftly on to the question. Thank you ever so much for the question. Do appreciate it as always. Will they regret it? Well, if they don't win the driver's title at the end of the season, you probably could turn around and say that they will very much regret not developing that car, because of course we know throughout the course of this season, every team has pretty much shut down their development packages because of the focus, the resources, the attention that's required on the new 2026 cars with its different power unit and of course associated aerodynamics. And so McLaren is one of those teams that stopped development quite a few races ago now. Red Bull, on the other hand, is the polar opposite. It decided to continue to introduce developments at various stages throughout the season. And in particular, during the midway part of the season when Max was really struggling with his RB21. Just not getting the results and performances out of it that he was doing for relatively okay at the start of the season, just managing to keep himself in touch with the two McLaren drivers. But obviously with the introduction of that new floor for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and then the introduction of a new front wing for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix that followed soon after, that car has been totally transformed, providing Max with the aero grip and balance that was previously lacking. Now, what that has done, of course, that has propelled that car into this race-winning, pretty much dominant car now, over and above the McLaren's. McLaren has confirmed, and Andrea Stella has confirmed, that there will be no upgrades, no more updates on this car. That is it. They have stopped development. I think if you're to ask Andrea right now, do you regret not continuing with your updates? He will say no. That's just the kind of practical, pragmatic man he is. But I think if you would sort of, as I say, fast forward to the end of the season, and should Max go ahead and win this title, with benefit of hindsight, they potentially might just have a reappraisal of that and think, well, maybe we should just have done something. But knowing McLaren, as I do, the way it works, knowing Andrea Stella, the way I do, the way he thinks and works and operates, the way he's developed and molded that team, I don't think they will ever turn around and say, no, we regret what we did because we want to get 2026 absolutely right. And we are confident that we will have another Drivers' Championship shot down the line.
I am so intrigued to see which development strategy between Red Bull and McLaren is going to come out victorious in the drivers' title come the end of the year, because, I mean, it's fair to say at the moment, all signs point towards Max, which leads us on very nicely to the next question, which comes from Pusby Cos. And the question is, can Max win the title, and would it be his best ever? This is one for all of us. I will go first. Yes, I think Max can absolutely win the title. I've been on the hype train for a few rounds now. In fact, I've been the train driver, because I just, at the moment, tunnel vision, all I can see is Max claiming a record equaling. Yeah, all they know. Yeah, all I can see is Max claiming a record equaling 5th consecutive drivers' title. But I also think, and I pointed this out in the podcast, if Max wins this title, given he was 104 points behind Oscar after Zandvoort, it would be the biggest F1 triumph, the best F1 title in F1 history, given what he has had to overcome points-wise in order to get it done. But of course, he still needs to get it done. Sam, for you.
So I'm just in suppressing laughter. I'm now crying over the tunnel vision pun, because that is very funny. Last year, we were talking about whether or not 2024 was Max's greatest championship. And I ultimately lent, from memory, that it was, but I felt 2021 was very, very close behind. I don't feel the same way now. If he wins this championship, you could make an argument for not only his greatest championship, you could make an argument for the greatest championship in F1 history, or at least recent F1 history. I would have, racking my brain, the nearest I can go back to where I think there's, something that's even comparable is 2007 with Kimi Räikkönen. And the Ferrari was a pretty good platform throughout the year. Kimi didn't have great form in the early part of the year, which is why he had to come from so far back. But Max and the RB21 will have achieved something truly remarkable if they are to take this title, given how strong the MCL 39 has been, and just the hole that he has had to dig himself out of in such a short amount of time. 64 points in 4 rounds. That is a massive turnaround. So yeah, I think he's showcased every single element of his weaponry across the year. It would be his most complete, his most improbable, and just most unbelievable championship. So yes, I think it definitely would be this season.
Ian?
Yeah, you got to look at all of Max's seasons and take them into context. Like 2021 will naturally go down as one of the greatest title fights of all time, if not the greatest title fight between Max and Lewis. And the way Max won that title in the such controversial circumstances in that final Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi, and everything that went around, that situation with the safety car and all that. And then you got 2023, to use the words of Christian Horner, that unicorn year, the former Red Bull team principal described as a unicorn year, where Max and Carl were just as one almost, and all those Grand Prix victories over the course of this season. But yes, in terms of comebacks this season, without a shadow of a doubt. For me, this would be the biggest and the best in F1 history, because to come from that position of 104 points at that particular point, with how many, that 9 Grand Prix remaining at that particular stage, and you not quite half the number of points that were available, but not too far short of the total number of points that were available at that stage, then given that particular title picture, the way things are going, the way that car has been transformed, then yes, for me, this would be better than 2021, although for different reasons and given the different circumstances. But yes, a comeback would just be, if it is completed, staggering.
I think they're great in different ways. I think 2021, 2023, 20, which is why I feel 2025 is his most complete in that sense.
Next question. I like the thing we've got recently of questions that we can all answer, because this one comes from Yarno, and it is, should track limits be awarded if it occurs as a result of fighting for position? Now, I'm assuming this question is, of course, directed towards the Lando Norris Charles Leclerc incident at turn 13, if my memory is correct, where, of course, they were fighting for position. A really great race-long battle is got to be said between the duo. Some awesome defending by Leclerc. And, of course, as a result of this defending, at one point, Lando did exceed track limits when on the outside, remained behind, but received a track limit strike. As we know in F1, if you receive 3 track limit strikes, you receive a warning, an additional track limit strike, and you get a 5-second time penalty. Lando, of course, received a strike for exceeding track limits, but it was as a result of battling Leclerc. So in my eyes on this one quickly, I don't believe you should get track limits if it's awarded while fighting for position like that situation, unless the driver who goes and exceeds track limits gains the spot. If that happens, then yes, fair play. If they've exceeded track limits and gained an advantage, made the position, okay, penalty, track limit strike, tell them to give the place back if needs be. But if they are fighting, remain behind, yes, okay, exceed track limits, then I think that's fair racing ultimately, because it's trying to give us a spectacle, it's trying to make an overtake happen. And in that situation, there's nowhere else for Lando to go. So I think, interesting question, Yarno. If a driver exceeds track limits while fighting for position, they should not receive a track limit strike. Ian?
I think you summed it up really well, Nick, in all fairness. We saw numerous black and white flags being issued over the course of that Grand Prix, and obviously the most prominent one was for Lando Norris. There were various other ones issued, but we do not know. We didn't get to see replays as to why was that particular driver having a battle with another driver, and that's why they exceeded track limits, or was it just one of those natural things where they'd just gone slightly wide in a particular corner? But yes, you are right. I think it is really unfair that a driver gets a track limit strike if they are battling for position and the attacking driver still comes out behind the defending driver. They're trying to have a go. They're doing the best that they possibly can under the circumstances. But yes, if he comes out ahead, having exceeded track limits, then not only more than likely would they be asked to be given the place back, should that be the case, but quite obviously, yes, they've naturally exceeded those limits. That would go or would count against them. So for me, it's a slam dunk one. I'm going to echo what you said. I totally agree with it. And it's one of those that I think should be looked at, because I do remember George Russell over the radio. He made a point of the fact that he got a track limit strike against him, but he turned around and said, well, look, I was going for a move, what was I supposed to do type thing, just paraphrasing there. So I think it's one of those that I'm sure the drivers might bring up in a driver's briefing if they haven't done so already. But yes, I think it's one of those that just needs a slight rule change to try and help the drivers, given the circumstances that they might be in at that particular time.
And of course, that comment from George came in the sprint race when he lunged down the inside of Max at turn 12 and, of course, then went off. And if I remember correctly, actually, if we go back to last year's US Grand Prix where Lando received a 5-second time penalty, that was for exceeding track limits and gaining an advantage because, of course, he rejoined the circuit ahead of Max Verstappen on that occasion, having been behind at the apex of the corner. Sam, for you, your thoughts?
I think it's an extension of the problem with the racing guidelines generally, where it is on, if you're forced off track by another driver, it's kind of the onus is on the driver on the outside to kind of vanish or get out of the way and make themselves, kind of invisible, which is just not practical in so many circumstances. Like we saw with Lando and Charles in the race. Where was Lando meant to go? So yeah, I agree. It's unfair to give a track limit violation in that circumstance. What I would maybe slightly caveat and say, you can gain an advantage without necessarily overtaking. If you've gone off track and it set you up well for a move later in the lap, or, kind of positioned you for ultimately what becomes an overtake, I think, then you've got to look at that and go, well, it wouldn't even just be a track limit violation. You'd have to give the position back. So I think that would need to be covered. But ultimately, overarchingly, I think, yes, that you shouldn't be penalised for trying to race and being pushed out wide by the defending driver.
Another question, and this one is also something for us all to answer, and it comes from Sarah. Sarah has asked us, who do we think will claim second in the Constructors' standings? And of course, we're all so focused on this battle for the driver's title between Lando, Oscar, and Max. But of course, there's a really good battle now for second in the Constructors' standings. To go through it quickly, Mercedes are second currently on 241 points. Ferrari are 7 adrift on 234. Red Bull are 8 behind Mercedes, 1 behind Ferrari in 4th on 233. I've said for a little while, I think after the summer break, that I think Red Bull will get second. Nothing to do with Yuki, purely to do with Max, but also the inconsistency of Mercedes and Ferrari, where let alone, I pointed this out in the podcast, let alone from Grand Prix to Grand Prix, from session to session, the form of Mercedes and Ferrari just varies so dramatically. So for me, pretty easy question, Red Bull to finish second. Sam?
I'm going to allow peak recency bias to course through my veins here and and join you and say I think that it will be Red Bull. Yeah, recency bias or just more evidence over the last few races since we last had this conversation, when I believe I said Mercedes would be second but come season's end. For all the reasons you gave, the consistency is not there for Mercedes or Ferrari, and Max Verstappen, as I said in the podcast, is inevitable. Yuki Tsunoda is at this stage a mere bonus in terms of what he might be able to deliver points-wise. So I think that averaged out across the final 5 rounds and 2 sprints, we'll see Red Bull finish second.
There was a really brutal comment actually from 2009 world champion Jenson Button post-race on Sky F1's feed, obviously in the UK, where they were discussing Yuki finishing 7th, and it was pointed out, that's a really good result for Yuki, he's finding some form. To which Jenson turned around and said, yeah, but he's still only 7th in a Red Bull. And we obviously did the question in the podcast as well, when was the last time the second Red Bull car finished in the top 5? And it was last year's Miami Grand Prix with Sergio Perez. It's been that long since Red Bull have had their second car deliver a strong result. Ian, for you, which is insane.
Races. It's just
insane.
Cannot. If Max can continue to do this first, second over the remaining 5 Grand Prix, then you've got to give Red Bull the nod. I don't think Ferrari has enough consistency about it in particular. Yes, wild fluctuations in form. Similarly with Mercedes. Mercedes should be good in Las Vegas, as they were last year. But that's 1 Grand Prix out of 5. So looking at it, if Red Bull most definitely has the best car right now with Max Verstappen at the wheel, just to underline that particular point. So I think you've just got to give Red Bull the edge. Bearing in mind how close the point situation is, only 10 points between the 3 teams. So if you look at the 5 Grand Prix and the 2 sprints, you've got to think that Red Bull's going to outscore. Certainly, yeah, it's going to outscore both Ferrari and Mercedes, given that small gap.
The Red Bull hype train is absolutely gaining more carriages by the second, isn't it?
There's no stopping
We're
it.
going to need another service.
No. Well, who knows? Coming very, very soon. Final question comes from Liana. And Sam, you can take this one. Has Oscar Piastri's poor run of form surprised you after he was so consistent for so long?
That's an intriguing question because, yeah, it's a real departure from the Oscar Piastri we saw earlier in the year.
Was that a train pun?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But to arrive at my point,
Oh God, it's dangerous now.
It's tedious. Oh, that's it. That's a headline word. I think with every single championship that I can remember, there's always at least a blip. You look at Max in 2023, Singapore, a blip. Sergio Perez won, a couple of races as well, 2 more blips. You could argue, given how strong he was that year. What Oscar's experiencing at the moment is, at this stage, a full-blown wobble, really. He is struggling. Is the pressure getting to him? Some pundits, Timo Glock, feels that he's unsettled. He's questioned his mental strength. I think unsettled's fair. I think questioning his mental strength is maybe a step too far at this stage, but he certainly isn't as unfazed and unflappable, that all the kind of ice running through his veins, all those kind of ways that we were describing him earlier in the year. I'm not surprised by that, because there always is that moment where you come up against adversity, regardless of how well you've been doing. So that's, to answer the question there. But if he doesn't arrest this slide in form over the next couple of rounds, it's kind of getting into kind of full-blown capitulation territory. It's just fallen apart from a little bit. And I think he's probably a little bit at a loss to kind of explain as to why, because he is, in his preparation, how he goes into a weekend, everything he does behind the scenes is so consistent. It's built around the same model, regardless of how the previous weekend has been. So I think he's probably searching for answers at this stage. But to answer your question again, no, I'm not surprised to see him suffer a poor run of form.
Ian, do you have anything to add? Because obviously, you've seen Oscar in the pen the last couple of Grand Prix. Does he come across a bit differently now compared to how he was when things were going so well during the European leg of the season?
No.
Exactly.
Oscar has this very kind of flat air about him when he talks to us. And I've not seen any real change. I don't sense that he's under a tremendous amount of, or is feeling the pressure, shall we say. I don't sense that he's struggling internally. I don't sense any kind of mental cogs whirring that's, playing on what's going on. He has just been his usual self. There's been a couple of moments where you could tell he's been a little bit irked by things. Obviously, we had Singapore in particular. The radio messages at that particular stage after that incident with Lando gave an insight as to what he was definitely thinking and feeling at that particular point. So that was something perhaps a little bit different than we'd not seen. But certainly when he's presented himself to us in the media sessions on Thursday, pre-race, and then post-qualifying and post-race, he's not really come across as anything other than just the normal, usual, steady Oscar. That was the case again post-Grand Prix on Sunday in Austin. You could sense there was a little bit of, I shall say, a little bit of unease as to why it had been such an off weekend, predominantly because of pace, a lack of understanding as to why he couldn't find the pace in his car that he'd previously been so accustomed to, but nevertheless exuded full confidence in the team that they would be able to get on top of it in very short order and work out why and be full steam ahead. Oh, no, that's another train pun, isn't it? I've just realised what I've said there. Choo-choo.
Oh, no.
That was dead. I can promise you can hear my voice my face, folks, that I did.
Politics this podcast has become the third rail, isn't it?
I did not mean that when I said it.
Let's get a train hat, I reckon.
A
train conductor's hat.
Into this weekend's Mexico City Grand Prix. I do apologise. I'm so sorry.
I think that was a brilliant way to end this fan questions video. A train conductor's hat is coming very soon. For those looking at Sam right now, his camera has gone very blurred, but have no fear, he is still here.
There we go.
There we go. If you have enjoyed this fan questions video, please be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, not only if you've enjoyed this video, but also, of course, to be in with a chance of winning that signed Racing Bulls shirt. And comment your thoughts below on anything we've discussed of these questions and any further questions you have from Kota, from Sam, Ian, and I. We will see you this weekend for the Mexico City Grand Prix. See you later.
I am going to now use a pun. This Q&A, fans Q&A video has left the station. Thank you for watching, folks.
Choo choo.